welcome to the Bethel Connect podcast. Thank you for joining us. You'll notice we haven't had a podcast for a few weeks. That's because we've been experimenting with the best way to do this podcast, ideas that work in a sustainable way within the church, but also looking at what equipment we might need to make it something of a good quality to listen to, and just coming up with ideas of how to do it. It really did start initially as something that was totally unplanned, and have felt that actually it is something that we would want to do in the future, but we need to put a little bit more thinking and planning about it. So we've done a bit of that, and this continues that experiment from for now. But we also wanted to, while we're planning it, also get on with it and do something with it. So what we're going to do over Lent, because it's Lent now, believe it or not. We're going to include the podcast as part of our Lent study, which is happening on a Sunday afternoon in the church hall. So this will just be sort of an extension of that, really just sharing the talk at the podcast, the talk at the meeting, and also just providing a way for you to engage with some of the thinking and the discussion that happens at the meetings, but just in the place where you're at. So what I would encourage you to do is make sure you have a pen and paper. There will be some links available in the description of the podcast where you can download perhaps the discussion questions and reflection questions that we use at the actual study, and perhaps you could do those by yourself. Obviously, or you could gather someone else, listen to the podcast either together or separately, and then just come together and look at the questions together. There'll also be, hopefully, some links to the films that we're going to be watching, the film clips, and so just look for those. If we can, whatever's extra to you being able to hear will be available in the links in the description. So because it's Lent, we have a Lent course happening. Like I said, it is called Not a Tame Lion, and it is based on a book which is a Lent course itself, which is based on the writings of C.S. Lewis. It's written by Hilary Brand, and so we're gonna look at some of the things C.S. Lewis said specifically in his books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is part of the Narnia series, and also just reflecting on some scenes from the movie Shadowlands, which is a movie, a biographical movie about C.S. Lewis and the life that he lived. So that's what we're going to be doing. This series explores some really important questions that I think everyone will be asking in their life at some point. Things like living in the shadows, living with the beyond, living with the unexplained, living with what we've been given, living with absence, and that will obviously take us into Easter and into Holy Week, and there will be a link between Holy Week and the things we look at then and this. So yeah, I invite you to join with us if you're able in the chapel, and perhaps if you're listening to this, you were either in the chapel and you just wanted to re-listen to it, or you wanted to, you're unable to, and you're engaging in this way. Maybe you're on the go, and that's absolutely fine, whatever works for you. So in this first session, which is Living in the Shadows, that's the title of it, we're going to just spend some time looking at what that means, and how we can begin to effectively live in the shadows when they're around us, and how we can begin to move out of the shadows, I guess. In John 10, verse 10, and we'll read more of this later on in the podcast, Jesus says this: "The thief comes only to steal and kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." That's John 10, verse 10. I wonder if you want to think just for a moment what it might be like to live in a world where it's winter all the time. You know, there's that statement in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe where Mr. Tumnus says, or no, Mr. Beaver, sorry, says it's winter but never, it's always winter but never Christmas. What would that actually be like? Spend some time just reflecting on what that might be like. Maybe think of ways to describe it in 5 words or less. That's a challenge. 5 words or less. If you need time, just pause the podcast and come back in a minute and continue listening. But just 5 words or less. Imagine a world where it's always winter. I wonder what you thought. I'm sure maybe it's not as picturesque as what Disney movies would show us, things like Frozen and in fact the Narnia series, where it just looks absolutely beautiful all the time. If it's winter all the time, how would you describe it? I mean, I think physically we're thinking things like maybe frozen fingers and toes all the time, never being able to warm up, damp clothes. There's nothing worse than coming home and the washing you hung up like 3 days ago is still damp. Grey and dark skies. It's always dark. There are no flowers. There are no strawberries. There's no going for long walks in the evening when you get home from work, or when you're feeling more up to it. Those are the physical things that perhaps winter all the time would be. But maybe it feels a bit like, if you're being a bit more philosophical about it, you're thinking, well, winter's kind of like a time where people seem a bit more closed and maybe even a little bit more suspicious of people around them. I mean, the reality is that we see our neighbors less in winter because no one comes out as much. And it's easy in those times when we're seeing people less to begin to be a little bit more suspicious of them. I guess if we were taking one season of the year where we would say it's dark, it's damp, maybe suspicion makes it feel a little bit like that, living in the shadows. And this is the world that C.S. Lewis is painting in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in Narnia. This is what Narnia feels like when we first get to it. It's a world that's kind of stuck in a half-life, a world that's been robbed of joy and delight. There's none of that. A world that's full of suspicion. Because if you've watched the movies, you'll know that people are encouraged to rat each other out, to the White Witch, and then they get turned into stone. It's a world full of that. But if you know anything about C.S. Lewis, he tells stories that are meant to be relevant to the world we live in right now. They're meant to speak into our lives now. So what was C.S. Lewis getting at? I guess the wonder would be, have you ever felt like, has your life ever felt like Narnia? Has it ever felt like it's always winter but never Christmas? That all the joy and delight has been robbed from it? Maybe have you ever felt like the life you intended to live or lead, the full life, the life you felt you were always capable of, has been stolen from you? Have you ever felt like that? And I wonder, when you think about that, what do you think has robbed you of that life? Maybe this is a reflection you might need to actually stop and pause and think about. Maybe you feel like it's winter but never Christmas. Maybe you feel like your life has been robbed. Who do you feel has robbed your life? What do you think has taken your life? Take a moment. Pause here. Write some things down. Think about it. And then come back. Let me give you a few guesses of what I think might make you feel like the life you intended on living has been robbed from you. Just a few guesses. Maybe it's the need to earn a living. You really, really want to do something else, but you can't because you need to eat. As they say in Finding Nemo, fish got to swim, bird got to eat. That's just how it is. Maybe you feel like your life has been robbed by an unplanned child along the way. Maybe it's because you have needy relatives, people that are ill or disabled, that you have to care for. And you don't regret caring for them. You don't begrudge caring for them. That's something you wanted to do. But when you reflect on it, you realize that actually, maybe it feels like it's stolen some of the life that you intended on living. Maybe for you, it is a physical thing yourself. It's a disability or an illness. Maybe it's a lack of confidence. You were just never confident enough to do the things you wanted to do. Or maybe others are to blame. Maybe you're in the position you are because others have been selfish or callous and have cost you this. When Jesus says the words that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, he's not really talking about those kinds of things. I think those kinds of things could possibly be a result of that. In some of those instances, certainly not all of them. He's actually talking about the devil. Whatever you think about the subject of the devil, that's what Jesus is talking about. And I want you to just spend a few moments thinking about that. Bear with me. Just suspend your disbelief for a few moments and play the what if game for me. What if there was some force that's always intent? What if there's some force that's always intent on robbing you of the full life that you were made for? What if that's actually the case? What if there's a power that's constantly twisting things, speaking lies to you in your head, and spoiling your life, the things you yearn for, taking those things away? What if that actually exists? In one of his other books, C.S. Lewis tells the story of a senior demon or a senior devil teaching a younger devil how to tempt people. The senior devil's name is Screwtape. The book is called the Screwtape Letters. It's a very short book, but there's so much in it. And he's speaking to his novice, Wormwood, and he says one of his aims is, if ever, this is what he writes, and I quote, this is Screwtape to Wormwood. If any faint suspicion begins to arise in his mind, suggest to him a picture of something in red tights and persuade him that since he cannot believe in that, therefore he cannot believe in you. So basically he's saying, make the person believe in something so utterly ridiculous that the idea of the devil cannot be taken seriously at all. So therefore the devil doesn't exist. There's a great movie that was came out in the mid-1990s called The Usual Suspects. I won't spoil it for you, but one of the main characters says this in it. He says, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. What if we are actually part of a huge cosmic battle between good and evil? What if? I guess people think that there are two equal and opposing errors to think about when we think about this thing, the devil, however you want to think about it. One is to disbelieve the existence of the devil at all. The other is to believe, but to have an excessive and unhealthy interest in it. So we can either, it's not real, or the other extreme is I believe in it, but I believe in it so much that it becomes like an obsession for me. And most of us normal people, are appalled by either one of those extremes. We don't want to be on any side of that pendulum, really. And so one extreme will drive us to the other, potentially. But consider for a moment that, like with a lot of things in life, there's a middle ground. That there's a place somewhere in the middle with a healthy respect for this power of evil and the subtleties it impacts us in our lives. Consider that the main aim of this evil, this devil, this shadow, is not to entrap us with the huge evils of the world, like murdering people, and you can name or whatever major evil that you can think of. But actually, the strategy is more that it makes us not recognize the evils that we commit at all. The evils that we wouldn't consider to be evil, but are actually just the absence of good. So perhaps doing something that's in between, or sort of a benign sort of thing, but there's no good in us doing it. Spending all day binging on Netflix, as the young people say these days, instead of actually going out and, doing good in the world. The Book of Common Prayer says this: one without whom nothing is strong. And in the Screwtape Letters, this is how Screwtape describes that. He says, and nothing is very strong enough to steal away a man's best years, not in sweet sins, but in the dreary flickering of a mind over it knows not what and knows not why. Nothing is the thing that steals away our best years, not in big sins that we think we're committing, but in just dreary flickering things. I find it really funny that in C.S. Lewis's time there wouldn't really have been TV in a major way, and there's this idea of flickering, which is really what TV is. I'm speaking to myself more than anyone else. It's not necessarily big dramatic sins that cause the most waste. The most damage is caused by the nothings of our lives, the fake, vague daydreams and the half-hearted interests and the lazy bodies and inert minds. That's where the greatest damage is done. So, I guess I don't know what you believe about the devil. But what if there is that power at work? Whether it's personal or abstract, whether it's within you or without, that is constantly trying to pull you away from the good. Forget the red tights or the pitchfork. Even forget the flamboyant evil of the White Witch in the Narnia books. Maybe it's this, that the greatest trick the devil has ever pulled was to convince the world that he didn't exist, and thereby tempt us with the nothing, lead us into the shadows, the things that actually steal away our lives, that waste away our lives. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 10 and verse 11. He says this: I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep do not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate, and those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. My purpose is to give them life and life abundantly. The Chronicles of Narnia and the writings of C.S. Lewis often point to this idea that there is someone who wants to rob and kill and steal and destroy. It's very much like the White Witch in Narnia, and the world works like that. So I would like you to just spend a few moments thinking about this. In what ways might a lack of belief in the devil damage or strengthen the way that you live your Christian life? I guess there are many ways that it could. And, for most of us, we will have come up with a varying amount of different opinions on that. But I thought I would just read from the book we've been reading to think about what it might look like, if how it might damage or strengthen our Christian walk. So let's look at the first one. Belief in the devil might damage the way that I live out my Christian life. Okay, so it might damage it by allowing people to blame their failings on the outside influence and thereby excuse themselves. So belief in the devil could be that. Could be the idea of a devil behind every bush. It could be the idea of I'm not to blame because there's this other power that's made me do it. It could also damage the way that I live out my Christian life by seeming so irrational and archaic as to compromise my intelligence. So people might look at me and go, you look like an intelligent person. How can you believe in this power, this being, this, however you want to describe what the devil is, you know? My opinion on it doesn't matter, but people would go, therefore they're irrational and I'm not going to listen to them. That's one way I guess it could damage our Christian lives. But how could it strengthen our Christian lives? It could strengthen our lives by making us realize that there is a much bigger spiritual battle going on of which we're a part. And again, that's not looking for demons behind every bush or angels behind every tinsel. It's really just being realistic. The Bible talks a lot about that battle going on in the spiritual realm. It could also make people realize that they're always being tempted in subtle ways and therefore need to take special care to pray for God's help and guidance. Temptation always comes in a much more subtle way than I think we expect. The temptation's to do nothing rather than to do something. Oh, I'll just watch one more episode. Or, you know what? I won't go for a run today. Ooh, I'll just have one more Welsh cake. Those sorts of things happen over and over again. None of those things are sinful necessarily, by the way. But they do rob us of an abundant life. Another way is it could make people unite against a common enemy rather than automatically blaming and mistrusting each other. Because essentially that's what happens in the Chronicles of Narnia. They're not united against a common enemy. They have a common enemy. They know the common enemy's there. But they actually resort to blaming and mistrusting each other. And the last way is it could make people believe that evil is an outside force to be resisted rather than just human nature. That's an interesting one. Sometimes we excuse ourselves and go, well, I'm only human. And for a lot of things that's true. But if it is an outside force, then surely something can be done to resist it. What can be done to resist it? If Jesus says, I've come to give you life, and the thief comes to steal, rob, and kill, and make it feel like it's always winter, but never Christmas, how can we resist it? Chronicles of Narnia actually give us a good example of that. When Lucy arrives, that's the video clip that we watched right at the beginning. When Lucy arrives, she meets a faun called Mr. Tumnus, and she spends some time with him. And so here's the question, and if you've watched the video clip or you've watched the movie, perhaps reflect on some of these. How does Lucy show humanity to Mr. Tumnus? How does Lucy show humanity to Mr. Tumnus? So, how does Lucy show spring or Christmas to Mr. Tumnus? The answer to that is she trusts him. She trusts him, even though at this point in the story, sorry for the spoiler, he's not all that trustworthy. She shows him her humanity by being interested in him, by asking questions about his life and his home and his father. And she also shows humanity by lending him her handkerchief. She gives him a small thing to help him with something that doesn't seem like it really matters. But in the scope of everything, it matters. What if that's actually how we resist the robber that comes to steal, kill, and destroy? What if, as we feel like our lives have been taken away from us and things have been wasted, What if actually the beginning to solving that is to show humanity to those around us? The reality is there's so much mistrust of people's opinions and people's motivations in the world today. You just turn on the news, you just talk to people in the streets, you just turn on social media, and no one trusts anyone else. Everyone is suspicious. It actually does feel like it's winter, but never Christmas. And the result of that is this air of suspicion that's going on. No, 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 it couldn't be the devil, because the devil doesn't exist. Why? Because the devil's greatest trick is to convince us that he doesn't exist. But actually, sometimes we're to blame, but sometimes the devil, again, however you explain what that is, does. With that in mind, think about one small touch of warmth and humanity from another, recently or in the past, that has made a difference in your life. Take a minute to reflect on that, to the people close to you, just before we look or think about the next part of our study. So the next part of what we're looking at is based on the clip that we just watched from the movie Shadowlands, where C.S. Lewis and his brother meet this woman called Joy Grisham for the first time in a cafe, and he talks about how he likes a good fight, and she says, well, how long's it been since you lost, basically. And then they take her on a tour, and she, around the colleges, and she tells them how impassioned she was about the cause of the Spanish Civil War, to which he replies something really, really interesting. He says, wasn't everyone, and that's interesting, because the Spanish Civil War was a huge debate around the time between the communists and the fascists, and that whole argument seems to have passed him by. When you watch the clip, you kind of feel like he's engaged with something else. Maybe he's even saying that. And then he starts to talk about the May Day singing that happens at Oxford every year, and he's been lived there for many, many years, and he talks about how great it is, but he says he's actually never been there. To which she responds to both of those things: do you go around with your eyes shut? Like the world is just passing him by, like he's not engaged in this big discussion that's been going on that everyone else has been having, but he's also not, he's been living in Oxford all this time, and he's actually never seen the May Day singing. And she says, do you go around with your eyes closed a lot? It's important to remember that this is a movie, and it's being told from the perspective in order to tell a tale, and we can't just put C.S. Lewis in a position where he's just this character on the screen. He was an actual person, and a lot of his writings do talk about how adventurous and passionate he was about topics of justice and things like that. But it is like he almost goes around with his eyes shut for these things. And I wonder how often we go around with our eyes shut, and how much that robs us of the life that Jesus says he will give us. So as we wrap up today, and we think about what this might mean for us, and through Lent, it's easy to go on living like the power of the devil, or the devil doesn't exist, and just let life go on, and let our and let the waste happen through the little things along the way, or the lack of doing the important things along the way. Maybe we're all a bit like C.S. Lewis in the movie, that we kind of go around with our eyes shut. What would it be like if we opened our eyes? And maybe Lent is a good time to do that. In fact, maybe Lent is the perfect time to do that, when we stop doing one thing and we take up something else, in order to make ourselves more aware of not just God, but the people around us and the situations around us. maybe that's the chance to move out of the Shadowlands, pardon the pun. Maybe it's to be a bit more like Lucy, to open our eyes to what's going on, and to be able to show our humanity to the people around us, and to be able to see the full life that God has given us. I really do hope that you've enjoyed sharing with us in this way. Come back next week, where Ian Beresford will be sharing on our next subject, which, let me just have a look at it because I don't have it right in front of me at the moment. Week 2 will be Living with the Beyond. Living with the Beyond. We look forward to this and hope that it's meaningful to you. So may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace.